that to blame a race, a group, for the sins of their father or the sins of their compatriots is evil. I totally agree, by the way. But whether we like it or don't like it, identity is a powerful force in politics. People that are considered Israel critical, we're being fed a line that identity politics is evil and we have to pretend it doesn't exist.
Nick Fuentes just shared his thoughts on what he believes is at the root of the Israel First problem. And in this clip, he talks about how this manifests in U.S. politics, why he thinks more identity politics is actually the solution, and why he believes Tucker Carlson is lying to you about the actual root of the problem. So let's watch. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
So we discussed this a little bit last night. Over the past few weeks, there have been several high-level meetings of Jewish people? Jewish people? What else you want to call it? First, there was the Republican Jewish Coalition Summit in Las Vegas. What do you want me to do with that one? The Republican Jewish Coalition. And this happened right after my interview with Tucker. And Jews like Mark Levin and Randy Fine and others got up before a delegation of Jews, before a gathering of Republican Jews, and they declared war on America first. They declared war on anti-Semites, on anyone criticizing Israel. They said they're going to write down everybody's names and they'll punish everybody who goes against Israel. Mark Levin said powerful and rich Jews, that's a quote, are calling him and saying, what are we going to do about Tucker? And Mark Levin said, we're tired of hearing about genocide. We're tired of hearing about foreign aid. We're taking names and we'll make our decisions.
I'm sure you are tired of it. Well, us Americans are tired of babies being plucked up from the rubble. And indeed, that was a Levin quote. You can call him an anti-Semite, I guess. Levin isn't going to get those assertions from most people, but you can call him that, I guess, if that's the standard. And this is also where Randy Fine called Tucker Carlson the most dangerous anti-Semite in America, and that he's leading a new Hitler Youth movement, and then comically, paid a bunch of people to hold up signs that said, Tucker isn't part of MAGA. That is what you got from this conference. I call it Genocide Fest 2025 because that is what it was. That's what Dave Smith is calling it too. It's exactly accurate. And we are seeing these people organize and use the same woke tactics of the liberal establishment to just smear people as racists if they don't agree with them when it comes to the mass slaughter of Palestinians in Gaza.
Okay. Past couple weeks, there have been more meetings like this. There was a meeting of the World Jewish Congress last week. Again, what do you want me to do with that? World Jewish Congress, look it up. It's on Wikipedia. The chairman is Ronald Lauder, who inherits the Estee Lauder fortune. And the president is a Rothschild. No, I'm not making that up. That's who's in the leadership. And the member organizations consist in the B'nai B'rith, the ADL, Hillel, the Jewish Student Organization, Jewish Lawyers Association, World Zionist Organization. They're all constituent members. It's like Davos, but for the global Jewish community. It's just what it is. Okay, I'm not being a conspiracy theorist. I'm not being anti-Semitic. I hope I'm not sounding hateful. It's what it is. And they get together last week, and Ronald Lauder gets before the body and says, we need to pass laws banning anti-Semitism. This weekend, there was another such meeting, the Jewish Leadership Conference, hosted by the Tikva Fund. And there, Joe Lonsdale received an award. Joe Lonsdale from PayPal Mafia, Stanford Review. Ben Shapiro and Barry Weiss had a discussion. I believe John Fetterman was hosted at another similar conference.
Yeah, it doesn't escape notice that these kind of tactics to police people's speech were condemned by the supposed right, some of these same figures involved in these conferences, like Mark Levin, like Ben Shapiro. But now you have individual states rewriting their hate speech laws to conflate anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism. So what they're saying is, if you're critical of Israel, well, you're guilty of hate speech. And that has happened in places like Georgia and Iowa and Kansas and North Carolina and Arizona. Various states have actually done this, setting up a horrific precedent that's being cheered on by some of the same people that rightly condemned and denounced Biden's Ministry of Truth to police disinformation on the internet, that rightly criticized Kamala Harris and AOC and Hillary Clinton and Tim Walz and John Kerry when on the eve of the 2024 election, they were coming out to say, hey, we need to police disinformation on the internet and on social media. That is what you're getting from this.
All of these meetings over the past several weeks are bringing together the most powerful Jewish influencers, billionaires, leaders, congressmen, and they're coming together in the past several weeks with the very clear message, which is that they are now going to strike back. They're going to strike back against everybody that has been criticizing Israel for the past 2 years. And they're taking aim at what they call the far left, led by figures like Zohran Mamdani and Ilhan Omar and the rest of them, and the far right, led by people like Tucker Carlson and Andrew Tate and Candace Owens and myself. They are putting us in the crosshairs. And so tonight we're going to talk about all that. We're going to talk about that conversation. And I hope that I can paint a picture for you and illustrate exactly what is going on in the world. What is going on with this? Because let me be very plain here. We are being told that our problem is one thing, even by people like Tucker Carlson. We are being told that our problem is the government of Israel and some of the decisions they're making. But it has nothing to do with Judaism. It has nothing to do with Jews. There is no such thing as an organized Jewish community.
Okay, so to push back on this a little bit, that's not Tucker's primary argument, that the issues are with Israel's government. Actually, and I'm crazy like this, I watch just about every Tucker Carlson clip and interview and monologue, which he just had last night, ironically enough, about Nick Fuentes. But Tucker's argument is actually his problem with the political alliance between U.S. and Israel lies mostly on the U.S. side. Actually, that it isn't Israel's government. In fact, he has been critical of Israel's government and especially Netanyahu. That is true. But ultimately, when this question is asked to him, he ultimately almost always answers that my government is duplicitous for getting involved in this alliance, for prioritizing Israel above America, for getting into Israel's wars. And he places that blame squarely on his representatives, his government, and his president, more so than on Israel. It's not even Israel that is the answer. I think Nick is strawmanning here a little bit. Now, does Tucker believe that this is a problem with Judaism in general? No, he doesn't. But he believes that the problem mostly rests on the U.S. government, which, by the way, is disproportionately Christian or claims to be Christian.
They don't work together across borders. They're not highly organized. They don't collaborate for a distinct and discrete ethnic self-interest. No, that's not the case. It's Bibi Netanyahu, as well as a number of other people that are not Jewish, and it's really only in the domain of foreign policy.
That's not Tucker's argument. That's not Candace's argument. They have problems with this and Christian Zionism, talking about it completely, openly, commonly, saying that's a problem too, and placing the blame squarely on the individuals that enable this relationship. That's a catalyst for this relationship. It doesn't just pertain to Israel or even Judaism. It pertains to the complicit entities within the United States comprising our criminal government that gets involved with that too. That does have more to do than just foreign policy. As Tucker Carlson regularly says, this is impacting how people are talking about free speech in the United States. It's not just foreign policy. It's not been Tucker's argument.
We're being fed. We're being, even by people that are considered Israel critical, we're being fed a line that identity politics is evil and we have to pretend it doesn't exist. And what is going on in the world, you cannot mention the word Jew in the same sentence as it. It is strictly speaking a question of Israeli policy. It is strictly speaking a question of the Israeli government and their collaborators among the evangelical Christian community and the neocons in the U.S. government. And let me say very plainly, that is a lie.
It's not a lie. It is complicity between the relationships between those groups. That is the problem. If it's not, you're just using collective judgment or collective guilt. I know that's something that Nick denied in his interviews with Dave Smith and Tucker Carlson, but that's the truth. And frankly, I think the best critics of Israel are disproportionately Jewish, like Glenn Greenwald, like Dave Smith, like Jeffrey Sachs, like Max Blumenthal. And it's not correct to say that it's more about Judaism at its root. It's not. The vile neocons were predominantly Christian in the government of George W. Bush. Now, the early neocons, a lot of them were Jewish. You had Irving Kristol, and I think James Burnham was, and you had some others, but there were others that were not. So this is just not the right place to play to square the blame on here. By just putting it on Judaism itself, it not only implicates Jews that don't support this nonsense, which, by the way, one of the most adversarial groups toward the war in Iraq were American Jews, but it also, by doing it, necessarily takes the blame off of some of the worst and most vile offenders of this, like Cheney and Bush and Rumsfeld and Lindsey Graham. People that did proclaim to be Christians despite engaging in this same behavior. So if you want to say it's a limited hangout to just blame Israel and you're not getting to the root of things, I think it's actually a limited hangout if you blame Judaism, because you don't get to the root of blaming, atrocities on monsters like Bush and company.
Okay. That idea, that premise, has no basis in reality. That is an ideological premise. It is based on assumptions and abstractions. It is based on a certain set of values. That is an ideological point of view. It is fundamentally a liberal, small l, liberal point of view, which says that we are all individuals. There is no such thing as identity. There is no such thing as tribe, nation, race.
That's not what people think. I don't know anyone that's a critic of identity politics that says identity politics doesn't exist or identity doesn't exist. No, on the contrary, they say it exists too much to the extent that we should bring politics to coalitions between individuals on individual issues they happen to agree with, not just this collective, sense of companionship over, one arbitrary characteristic that happens to join some peoples together, including race. And I'm not one of these guys that thinks that, race is a social construct strictly. Otherwise, anthropologists couldn't determine what race bones come from and able to try to identify, victims of crimes that way. That does happen. But at the same time, there's basically no one out there that denies identity or denies identity politics, including some of its most fierce critics, for good reasons, I think, but that's not the case.
The certain religions and the ideas contained in them do not have consequences. Others do, like Islam and arguably Catholicism, but not Judaism. This is a load of nonsense. And I'm actually glad that I was able to sit with Tucker a few weeks ago because he confronted me on exactly this disagreement. And I think we were talking past each other, but he gave me his speech about blood guilt, which we've now all heard, I think, 6 million times, roughly. And he tells us that to blame a race, a group, for the sins of their father or the sins of their compatriots is evil. I totally agree, by the way. But he seems to be obliquely saying the subtext underneath that, which I don't disagree with, is that we cannot talk about Jews as a political entity.
I don't think Tucker's ever said that openly. Maybe Nick is deriving that from his interpretation, but I will agree with Nick. A lot of people, especially on the right, are willing to use sweeping kind of conclusions and assertions about, say, Muslims that they would never do about Jews. They would never do that about organized Jewish religion and organized Jewish organizations that have takes on foreign policy like they would against vast swaths of Muslims, many of which they just justify, killing and slaughtering in mass numbers in Gaza. So I'm with Nick on that 100%. Also with Nick on that it's not appropriate to, lash out or conduct violence upon any individual when it's not deserving. And that there's no such thing as collective guilt, blood guilt. He just said he agreed with that. I agree with that too.
As a group, pursuing a strategy together, which they clearly are. And I said in that interview, look, I'm a Christian. I don't want to harm anybody. And as Christians, in a certain sense, we're individualists and universalists. We don't want to harm any group of people. But whether we like it or don't like it, identity is a powerful force in politics. They believe it. People believe it about each other. And so we have to deal with it.
No doubt about that. Agree with that 100%. It is a powerful force. It's a powerful force of those that embrace it. And it's a powerful force for those that critique it because it is a powerful force. So I'm with him. We have a different perspective on, he seems to believe that there's some denial of this power. But I think basically everyone acknowledges that, even the fiercest critics.
And so what that means specifically is that Jewish people, not all of them, not every single Jewish person alive, but many billionaires and the leaders of these organizations, they're organizing themselves on the basis of their Jewish identity for what is best for them as Jews. And that is really the essence of our dilemma in the West. We have now a liberal civilization based on blank slate, based on individualism, based on the repudiation and rejection of race, religion, creed, nation, these kinds of things. But the most powerful ethnic faction in the Western world has not embraced that. Every other group is expected to give up those things to participate in the open society, but they have not. And they happen to be the most powerful faction. And it leads to these horrific policies which are self-serving for them and are a liability for the rest of us, like the Iraq War, among other things. So we'll talk all about that. I'll elaborate on what I mean by that. But that is really the big question. At the bottom of it all, that is the biggest question. So,
all right, so Nick spends a lot of time critiquing, organized Jewry, and I won't deny it. These organizations exist. They do it. Obviously, it doesn't involve all Jews. Again, like I said, some of the best critics of Israel are Jewish. That goes without saying. At the same time, though, he, condemns that. He spends lengths of time criticizing that, saying that that's wrong. It's morally wrong for this to happen. These people that are organizing on the basis of Jewry to do things that benefit Jews. That's paraphrasing exactly what he said there. But what is his solution to that? His solution to that he articulates regularly on his show is that white people should organize on the basis of their whiteness for the benefit of white people. So his solution is not to say that this is wrong. His solution, generally, what he, insists upon and articulates a lot, is that whites should just do the same thing on the basis of their whiteness for what's good for whites in the United States. Like he's saying Jews do on the basis of what's good for people in Israel, for Jews in Israel. So his solution is the same thing that he identifies as the problem. To me, this is a little bit inconsistent. It'd be like saying, hey, I think it's morally wrong for, women to abort babies, that abortion's wrong, abortion is murder. And then to counter that, well, we need to abort babies. We need to abort one baby for each baby that is aborted. And you can see how this just falls apart on face value. It's either that it's immoral and I don't want to do it, or it's immoral and I'm going to be immoral by doing it, if that's your view. I know a lot of people don't have that view on abortion, but you can apply this to literally everything. If it's immoral to bomb people in the Middle East, well, we need to bomb people in a different country to counter that immorality. It doesn't make sense, it doesn't hold ground, and it doesn't hold sway. So yeah, this problem is on an individual level. The West is built on a system in which individuals are culpable for wrongdoing, and they don't inherit virtue from other members of their perceived tribe and lineage and race either. That everyone is accountable for their own deeds. And treacherous deeds in this respect, in the respect to the Israeli-U.S. alliance, if you want to call it that. I don't think it's an alliance. I think it's actually treasonous to some extent, especially after the bombing of the USS Liberty in 1967 that caused 34 sailors to lose their lives and hundreds of casualties. I just don't see the consistency in this argument. I think you have to place the blame squarely on where it lies, and to do otherwise necessarily takes away from the culpability that is deserved from the greatest arch-villains of our time, the greatest massacres, and the greatest warmongers of our time, the Bushes and Cheneys of the world that are responsible for about 5 million deaths worldwide, for plunging us into $8 trillion in debt just from the war on terror, that we're still feeling the ramifications of. We're still feeling those ramifications in terms of debt and inflation. So I've had a lot to agree with Nick on, especially concerning the Epstein files in Israel lately, but this is one area we just don't agree on. I think the actual limited hangout is saying this is Judaism. It seems to shift the blame away from many of the people that are culpable for the most vile deeds, which again are disproportionately Christian or claim to be Christian in our own government, in our own bureaucracy, in our own deep state. And yes, they collaborate with AIPAC and the Israel lobby. That's a true problem. It's a major problem. But the blame for that rests both on the Israel lobby and on, the majority Christian government that accedes to every one of their demands and every one of Netanyahu's wishes to the detriment of Americans. But what do you think? Let me know. Am I off? Any counter to my arguments here? Do you think that Nick is proposing a solution that is, immoral if he believes that organized Jewry is immoral? Let me know in the comments down below. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel. Also consider becoming a YouTube member. If you like this video, please consider joining. If you click that join button, you'll get access to all of my videos before they go live to the general public on YouTube. You'll be able to see those members only videos right away. Also, if you want a free copy of my first book, Compact of the Republic, click the link in the description below. It'll shoot you out to a site. Plug in your email. I'll send that to you free of charge, no obligation, just because you're an awesome listener and watcher. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.